All right, welcome to Ford News. He is Jonathan Ford. I am Brian London. It's an emergency pod. The immunity decision has just come down from the Supreme Court. A 6-3 decision. John Roberts writing the majority opinion. Sotomayor writing the dissent. And Jonathan, it's not full immunity for the president, but there is some partial immunity. And Donald Trump's camp seems to be celebrating the decision, although this one needs to be dived into because it's a little bit complex. What do you make of the decision?
Well, right now, we're just digging in briefly, just like everybody's opinion is kind of changing a little bit as they read more in this. My original outlook of this while reading it is that we've always known the president of the United States does have some form of immunity when it's regards to his a constitutional authority as president, whether that's um, wars or foreign policies or anything like that. So, as at the surface, I don't. I think people are looking way too much into this, and I think the Supreme Court punted much of this down to the lower courts to actually make a determination if it's his constitutional authority as president uh, due to the criminal charges or any cases that are brought against him.
The way that the court came down with this is if it was an official act for the president in his duties as president, there is absolute immunity. If if there's some question there, there's still a presumption of immunity, which is an interesting thing, and that's the thing that will get sent down to lower courts, and courts will decide on. And also, what is official versus non-official acts? Another thing the courts will decide on. But I just wanted to read real quick. Justice Sotomayor, in closing her dissent, this is what she wrote. Never in the history of our republic has a president had reason to believe that he would be immune from criminal prosecution if he used the trappings of his office to violate the criminal law. Moving forward, however, all former presidents will be cloaked in such immunity. If the occupant of that office misuses official power for personal gain, the criminal law that the rest of us must abide by will not provide a backstop. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. The interesting thing is in the dissent, Sotomayor, joined by Justice Kagan and Justice Jackson, normally in the dissent, they will sign respectfully. In this instance, I think it might be the only time that these three justices have not signed the dissent with respectfully. They just signed their names. It goes to show you what they think about this decision by the other six.
Yeah, but again, I still think we're reading, and I may have a different opinion when we come to our next week's podcast. But right now, I think that we're still reading too much into this. I think that what they're specifically talking about as far as constitutional authority as the president is that they still have to be impeached and removed from office through the Senate, and that's where the actual power of a removal for the president and to determine whether those criminal acts were within the authority of his presidency or acts within his presidency protected by the Constitution.
Let's say, as commander in chief, Donald Trump or whoever is president wants to send SEAL Team 6 to assassinate someone who is a political adversary and someone that he deems is a threat to democracy. Would that not be in his official duties as president? And would he not be immune in that instance?
No, I don't think he would be immune. And basically, what it talks about is his constitutional authority, and it uh, repeats basic rules or laws that he's protected under that. And the Supreme Court basically notarized that even or talked about that even in their original uh, oral argument leading up to this is uh, would the president actually have any type of authority to knock off a political opponent or unalive a political opponent. And I don't think that that would absolutely be the case. Now, the one thing that people could argue is, will this tie up or prolong criminal cases against the president? And absolutely it will, because the lower case would have to determine on whether that's his authority or not. And then, of course, it will most likely go through the appeal process, possibly all the way to the Scottish. For the most part, I don't really see yet anything that wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting a partial immunity, but let's also keep in mind that any act that's deemed outside of his presidential authority is absolutely no immunity at all.
I think the real thing, what everyone is looking at right today is the impact that this will have on Judge Tanya Chutkan's case, the one with Donald Trump obviously attempting to overturn the 2020 election, the January 6th case, the fake electors, all of this stuff. This is really going to impact this case, and we're going to have to see what happens. But it's definitely going to delay this case, and there's no chance this case happens before the November election.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to delay the case. And let's keep in mind, the Judge Cannon case had absolutely zero chance of going to any trial this year. It's so backlogged with motions and stuff that a date hasn't been set, and it most likely would have been in 2025 anyway. And even with the DC case, with the delays that have happened waiting for the immunity decision from the Supreme Court, most likely would not have happened until at least late 2024 to 2025. And the Georgia case, we have other motions that are delaying that as well. But back to the actual subject, is absolutely it's going to delay. But to me right now, just reading at the surface, I think it was more of a punt from the Supreme Court as far as what is he's constitutionally allowed to do and what's within his authority. And they'll have to rule on that one criminal case according to another criminal case.
You know, Jonathan, you've been very adept since I've known you at deciphering legal opinions. You're great at reading these legal opinions with all these SCOTUS cases and lower court cases. I'm not sure I know anyone in my personal life that's as good as understanding this stuff. I'm not a lawyer. I don't even try to play one on a podcast. Mm-hmm. But just in the last, hour since the decision came down, I've obviously been searching for opinions and looking for the Chuck Rosenbergs and the Andrew Weissmans and the Katie Fangs and the Maya Wileys and all of these people. And I've seen all of them discuss this, and not one of them has been positive about this Supreme Court decision. There's now Chuck Rosenberg did kind of agree with you, like, hey, let's take a step back and see what happens. But there's a lot of very sound legal experts that are really worried about the impact that this decision obviously is going to have, not just with the cases against Donald Trump, but obviously down the line. And, the Supreme Court, their decisions, impact things for decades and decades to come. I just want to read this tweet from former Attorney General Eric Holder. Our democracy has been gravely wounded. The Trump immunity decision says a president can violate the criminal law if he acts within his broadly defined constitutional authority. Absurd and dangerous. There is no basis in the Constitution for this court constructed. Someone like Eric Holder says that, I tend to take a step back and be like, you know what? He knows a lot more about law than I do. I think I should be concerned.
Andrew Lawfer, I don't know if you know who that is. He's on X, and he's basically stating, that we all knew that the president had immunity within the act. So they're all starting to come to that a little bit of conclusion, but they're also talking about what does this do to the individual court case in like DC, like where is Judge Cannon, or what type of field day will she have with this known decision by the Supreme Court and making her determination on whether it should be thrown out or not. I just question that, especially with the DC case, or not the DC case, excuse me, the Florida case, is that the crime was well outside of him leaving office. Because if we just remember, the crime was never that he necessarily took the documents; it's that he refused to return them after the National Archives requested them back, and the Department of Justice requested them back, and a subpoena was issued, and he obstructed the investigation, which I think and final ruling is going to be well outside of what his constitutional authority or within the office of the presidency.
So, I want to convey something that Neil Katyal, who has argued so many cases in front of the Supreme Court and was the interim Solicitor General of the United States, said just a few minutes ago before we started this, which is, if ever there was a reason for the Biden campaign and everybody else as we head towards this election to make the Supreme Court and their decision making the number one issue as we head towards November, this is it. Jonathan, the Supreme Court has a huge impact on our lives and on the way this country operates. The Biden campaign, the Democrats, everybody on the ticket has got to make the Supreme Court and what they've done over the last couple of years the number one issue as we head towards November.
Yeah, and I think what the SCOTUS is actually doing right along with abortion rights is just giving more fuel to the fire for Democrats to come out and vote this November, because we're looking at the potential of 3 SCOTUSes retiring within the next 4 or 5 years. So we just have to stay focused and vote and make sure that President Biden is reelected. So we actually, because the fact is that if Donald Trump gets into office, we have no idea where these court cases or the charges that's been brought against him, where they will fall after that. I mean, the Department of Justice could literally be filled with Trump loyalists. And then what would end up happening is the court cases would just go away, because there would obviously be the special counsel would be gone, a new attorney general. So we just have to get out there and vote so we can prove that no one is above the law. And actually in the Supreme Court ruling was indicated in there that no one is above the law. I just think we just need to dig in, because the ruling is pretty long, and I was reading really, really fast, and I was reading Twitter opinions and then your text messages. So once we deep dive into this, I think we'll learn a little bit more. But I do think that even dropping it to lower courts is kind of ridiculous, just because it punts it, and also because it's going to delay these court cases.
Yep. All right. So we had to get this emergency pod up. We had to react to this decision. We urge you to, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, go find our episode 12, where we dig into the debate and the reaction to that, plus the Chevron decision. We've got a lot of content for you here on Ford News, and we appreciate everyone, all of you, for watching and listening and sticking with us. Most importantly, Jonathan, you need to get some sleep, man. You've been working too hard. So we're going to let you do that. And we're going to continue to dig into some of this stuff, and we will definitely have more reaction to this decision by the Supreme Court coming up on next week's Ford News. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time here on Ford News.